Hello everybody, we're back going over some of the stuff that AMG changed. I know I'm a little bit late to the party here, I apologize, some stuff came up, but I did want to do a video on this and get some thoughts out there. For those of you who don't know, AMG went through and made some changes to some cards in Armada, namely stuff that had already existed, like Agate, Armada, Onagers, etc., and mostly to Rapid Reinforcements 2 stuff. This included text, point changes, etc. I guess if you haven't heard about this yet, kind of living under a rock, I guess. This has been kind of the big news in Armada for the last week or so. They released this on the 11th, I believe, of October, so just about a week ago today. So I just wanted to go over it, give my thoughts on it, because some of them are pretty topical to recent videos I've done. So without further ado, I don't want to waste too much time on this. Let's jump in. First changes are going to be to some older pre-existing stuff, starting with Agate. Text is the same, just went up from 20 to 25 points. That is definitely a change that you'll feel in some lists. However, it's not ultimately going to be that impactful, I don't think. For a lot of lists that Agate's in, people will just either get rid of some bid or move a couple things around to keep her. In the lists that she's just thrown in there because she was a 20-point commander, maybe they'll look at Dodonna instead, see if they can make him work a bit better. But for the most part, this is just getting her bumped up to a bit more where she probably should be. I don't know if 5 is quite enough. I would maybe look at like 7 or 8 might feel better, just because then you're losing a bit something else a bit more substantial. But now she's more of a consideration, her points cost. So I think that's a fine change. Ramadi, also the exact same text, points from 20 to 28. So this one's a bit bigger, and this one's going to hit a lot of Imperial lists hard because Ramadi was arguably the best commander in the faction to begin with, just ability-wise. You could argue for JJ, Ozzel, etc. But now, and he was 20 points, and now up at 28, now you really are taking him for his ability and not just that, oh, he's 20 points, he's nice to have, because that ability is almost always relevant. Now you actually, need to think about it. So I think Ramadi is still very good, and we'll still see quite a bit of Ramadi, but I think Ozzel is now pretty firmly the best commander that the Empire has access to overall. I think Sloane is still very strong, Thrawn is sneaky good, JJ is always relevant, but I think that Ozzel now becomes the best Imperial commander, and we'll start to see a lot more of him, which is great, because I don't think anyone really hates Ozzel. He doesn't do that much game-breaking stuff, just lets you speed up or slow down a little bit. Relatively inoffensive, but I think he's very good and underexplored, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, hopefully now that Ramadi has gone up. Next is one of my favorite changes here. Tranquility has gone from 3 to 7. Thank goodness. You all know my deep, deep hatred for this card and how stupid efficient it was. And it's still good, and it's still going to be played on almost every Venator that the Republic fields. However, 7 points is much more appropriately costed. Now you're paying what you should have been paying this whole time. It's still a great card, still going to see a lot of play. It's just not as absurdly efficient as it used to be. So I think this is a fantastic change, a very simple change, and I think a very, very good change, very healthy for the game. This next one's a little bit of a head scratcher. Watt Officer from 5 to 9. So Watt Officer was very good. He remains good. His ability is very strong. You can, in a lot of cases, kind of turn a Munificent or something. You can make it almost invincible as long as you have time to get the repair commands off. Because and stuff like AMF, you can get 5 tokens off of the best fields when you use him. So he was very good. I don't know if the 9 points is warranted. I probably wouldn't have done this. If they wanted to bump him up, maybe bump him to 7? I don't know. We'll have to see. A lot of this stuff is really just going to depend on, it's going to take some time to see the actual impact of a lot of these changes. But I guess they didn't want CIS to feel left out on the whole nerf bat, so they went ahead and hit Watt. But, this is he probably didn't need to be changed, or if he was going to be increased, probably not to 9, but who knows. He's still a good card, and he'll still see play, but there's less pressure to take him now that he's 9. Some people have compared him to Captain Brunson. who's also 9, and that's a similar level of defensive effect, I guess you could say. And I think that's a fair comparison, but I don't know that. I mean, CIS was seeing almost no competitive success, particularly at high-level tournaments, and so I don't know that they needed any nerfs, but whatever. We'll just see what happens when stuff gets on the table. These next changes to the Onagers, I think, are what most people are excited about. And I'll say up front, they needed to happen. Maybe not to this extent, which we'll get to. But the Onager definitely needed to be changed or nerfed in some way. It was just too prevalent in the meta. Worlds was a prime example of that. I think most of the people who are angry at these changes and think the Onager was fine are probably the people who were using and abusing them, for lack of a better term. I think the majority of the Armada community, from what I've seen, is very happy to see the Onager get set back a little bit. So the test bed went up 20 points from 96 to 116, which I think is the biggest points change I've ever seen in Armada. And then the Star Destroyer went from 110 to 120, so a 10-point increase. I don't think the Star Destroyer needed to go up 10. It was already a pretty niche option to begin with. It didn't have the same insane points efficiency that the test bed did. And so when you were running the Star Destroyer, you really had a plan for it. You weren't just putting it in there as this hyper-efficient long-range artillery piece. I've always liked the Onager Star Destroyer. Maybe that's a hot take, just because I felt like it was more appropriately priced. The turbo laser was cool, and it didn't have the stupid engine tech slot, so it couldn't go speed 4. So it behaved more like an actual artillery piece. So I don't think it needed to go up 10. Maybe you could have it go up 5. I don't know. They probably wanted to keep it more than the test bed. So I guess if they were dead set on the test bed going up 20, then yeah, the Star Destroyer did need to go up 10. But I don't think that's necessary. I mean, now it's the same price as an ISD2. And I'd probably take an ISD2 in a lot of cases. So it remains to be seen how much play it will see. The test bed going up 20, my initial reaction was like, holy cow, that's a huge increase. Like, that's going to invalidate so many lists that have been running around. That combined with Ramadi, I mean, Donager goes up 48 points. That's like 2 Gazantes. That's most of your squad wing that list takes. Like, that's a crazy nerf. However, I mean, it was kind of warranted. I would not have gone up 20. I maybe would have gone 14, put it at like 110. 20 is definitely significant, but I'm glad to see it. It had been ruling the meta for too long, and now it's going to be more of a consideration. Now you don't just get to like take it for free, quote unquote, because it's so cheap. Now you're giving up almost the whole Gazanti, or you're giving up a couple squads, or you're giving up half the upgrades on a ship to still take the test bed, which I think is good. I'm glad to see it nerfed. I'm glad that it's not going to be quite as prevalent, probably. However, I think the Onager's demise has been overblown by a couple people. It's not like they deleted them from the game or made them prohibitively expensive. They're still the same price or less than Star Destroyers. They're still, not even a third of your fleet base cost, and so Onagers are still going to be around, and you're still going to have a plan to deal with them. They didn't adjust the beams at all. They didn't adjust how ignition works or anything like that, and they didn't nerf price, importantly. So the Onager is still a threat, and it's still going to be around in the meta. So I don't want people looking at this and being like, oh yes, now I don't have to worry about Onagers. Well, you still do. But hopefully they're going to be around a little bit less, and it's going to feel a little less bad when they blow you away from across the table, just because your opponent's paying 20 to 28 more points for the privilege. So hopefully that ends up being as good a change as I think it could be. I think the game's going to be in a much better state with these changes. These changes are in addition to some of the Rapid Reinforcements 2 changes, and I thought those previous changes were good. I think these ones are also very good and really solve a lot of my gripes with the game. We're going to touch on Anakin and Matchstick last because they are very relevant to my last video and the episode of the Armada podcast that I was on talking about Anakin, Matchstick, etc. So we're going to save them for last. But first is Draven. This is one of the weirder changes in my opinion. So his text now reads, at the end of each command phase, you may look at all command tiles assigned to one enemy ship. Then you may place 2 command tokens, each of a different type, on this card. After an enemy ship resolves a command, you may discard a matching command token from this card. If you do, that enemy ship gains 1 matching raid token. So right off the bat, I think a lot of people didn't read that all the way through, or they understood it incorrectly, and they thought he was going to be like perfect raid on demand right when you want it, stopping your opponents from doing anything. But sadly, I think he's now worse than he used to be because of a couple things. Number one, your opponent gets to resolve a command before you give them the raid. So on the turn that they need to do something, they get to do something because you can't raid them before that with Draven. On top of that, it has to be a matching token. So if you think about a situation where your opponent has an ISD and you look at their dials with Draven and it's nav, then Confire, then repair. Draven is almost useless in that situation because they flip that top dial, it's a nav. So you're like, okay, after they resolve their nav and get to do whatever they want to do with that navigate, I'll give them a nav raid. Then the next turn, they flip Confire. Okay, well, they don't have a Confire raid, so they get to do that, and then you can give them a Confire raid. And then after that, the next turn, they reveal a repair, and they don't have a repair raid, so they get to do it, and then you give them the repair raid. So the timing of how he works and the fact that it has to be a matching raid token means that his actual usefulness is going to be pretty limited. He's also completely invalidated by all the token generation in this game. Getting rid of raid was easier than getting around his previous restriction of, you don't get to spend dials basically, or if you do spend dials, they're effects of tokens. So I think that was stronger than what this is, and the fact that he's at 28 points, I still don't think he's worth taking. I think he's weaker than his previous iteration was, and now you are countered by more things, and you're more limited in what you're stopping your opponent from doing. But again, this is all purely speculation. He could be good when people are starting to get him on the table. I don't really see why you would run him. But I guess I'm very happy to be proven wrong on this. I would love to see some people put up some big results with Draven in tournaments, but I just don't know that that's going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think he's as strong as some people initially thought when you actually read the text and think about how that looks on the table. Anywho, price didn't get any changes, which is weird to me because they touched basically everything else. Fen also didn't get any changes. It was just like a text cleanup. They gave Vault a brace instead of an evade. So he's now a brace scatter ace, which is neat. I think that's a buff regardless of what Max says in the Discord. I think that having the brace is definitely better for 18 points. So maybe he'll find his way into some light and medium squad screens. Who knows? Asajj, text changed to: during the activation of a friendly ship at distance 1 to 5 of you, you may exhaust this card to discard 1 raid token from an enemy ship at 1 to 5 of you. If you do, that friendly ship may gain 1 command token of any type. So during the activation is a pretty generous timing, and so this is going to be definitely, you can find use for this. I don't know if she's better or worse than the previous iteration of Asajj. I've seen people arguing for both, and I don't quite know where I stand. I had never played with the previous Asajj. I don't particularly enjoy CIS, and so and the CIS lists I was playing, I was not including her. I don't know if this changes now. I don't know if I would include her or not. I guess more token generation, on-demand token generation is pretty good. The raid restriction means that you're either going to be running a TF or Dooku list, or you're including B2 rocket troopers or something in lists that don't have TF, which seems like kind of a big tax to pay just to make Asajj work. But who knows? She could end up being pretty good. I think some people are excited about her, so I'll be interested to see her on the table. I believe, yes, that is everyone. So let's get to Anakin and Matchstick. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. The squad Wat Tambor went down from 20 to 18. Can't forget that. CIS get their free comms net now with those big savings on the Wat Tambor squad. I think, in all seriousness, I think 18 is the right price for what you're getting. I think that's an appropriately priced squad. I think 20 was probably too expensive, so Taking a couple points off there might make this feel a little bit better. You might be able to squeeze a couple more things into squad balls, move some points around, get that free comms net or Hondo, or Teaks, I guess. So I think it's a good change, and I think he'll see some play here and there, especially now that the Watt officer is more expensive. You know, there's less. You're losing out on it less than you would be when it was 5 points if you were going to take Watt Tambor squad. So I think he'll see a little bit more play, which is nice. But let's get to the big boys, Anakin and Matchstick. So they completely changed these cards. And I think there's almost no argument to say that the game is worse off now than it was before based on these changes. I think, as you know from my long Anakin video, I think he was a huge problem in the game. And basically anything would have been better than what he was before. And so I'll say it up front. He's definitely worse. He's definitely way less powerful than he used to be. And that is a good thing. Full stop. If I wasn't going to say anything else today, that would be it. Anakin is not as strong and, you know, and doesn't have the same gravity that he had, the same restrictions he was putting on list building. He's much more in line with the general power level of other stuff now, and I think that is great. Same with Matchstick. So let's get into it. Anakin Skywalker, Commander, went up from 29 to 31 and now reads, while a friendly ship is attacking a ship, if the defender is at distance 1 to 5 of at least 2 other friendly ships, one other friendly ship at distance 1 to 5 of the defender may spend 1 defense token. If it does, the attacker may reroll up to 3 dice. That's a lot of qualifiers there and stuff to think about that may be a little bit daunting looking at the text, but it's pretty simple. Yeah, just think about it kind of like Kraken for the CIS. You need to have 2 other friends at 1 to 5 of an enemy ship that you're shooting. Simple enough. 1 to 5 is a huge range, and you're probably already going to want to be at that range or closer because 1 to 5 is where you're going to be using your dice, unless you're an Onager. And so I think that's going to be a pretty easy qualifier to meet. Once you've met that condition, you can spend 1 token on one of those other friends that you have that are at 1 to 5 of the enemy. So in a lot of cases, it'll be you'll spend a contain or another token you don't need to use, and then the ship that you're actually attacking with can reroll 3 dice. I think that's a pretty neat ability. I don't think it's worth 31 points, particularly with those qualifiers. But Gar did need rerolls, and Anakin did need to be changed. And so I think this is a pretty good compromise. I think there are a few, Republic fanboys out here who are like, oh, they've massacred my boy. Gar is now the worst faction. It's unplayable. AMG is the absolute worst. But I think that this could see some use. I think stuff like that we haven't seen before, like Svats en masse kind of thing, like a bunch of victories or Ven 1s or something, all with Svats. Stuff like consular spam or just general Republic MSU could be very interesting. You now have more of an argument for swivel mounts on a lot of ships and like trying to fish for APTs, since you can now you can do your initial reroll with your weapons team of like ordnance experts, whatever you're doing, and then you can fish even more with this new Anakin ability. Or you can reroll your Svat dice, which was previously basically impossible. So I think he opens up some new options. I think people need to get creative and see what he can do. And I think ultimately he may not be that compelling of an option, especially at 31 points. And that's okay. Republic still has a lot of really good commanders. But I think that there's some interesting stuff you can do with him. And I think it's very safe to say that the game is in a much healthier state without his previous ability. I think that's almost inarguable. So I'm very happy to see this. Let's also talk about Matchstick here. He went from 14 to 16, so not a huge increase. Text now reads, when a friendly ship resolves a squadron command, if you are in range to be activated, up to 3 of the squadrons with bomber it activates can be at distance 1 to 3 of you. So basically it's just like relay for bombers. It extends your activation range for your bombers, which is good because now you can start taking expanded hangars or other offensive retrofits and not have to take boosted comms as often if you're running a squad build, which is nice. I think this might be one of the most balanced changes of the thing. Matchstick was the strongest card to come out of Rapid Reinforcements 2. He was absolutely dominating the meta. It was kind of unbelievable how much he was dominating the meta. Not only was he in almost every single Republic list at tournaments, but those lists were making top 8 and top 4 and winning. He was part of almost every single Republic winning list, and Republic was dominating the top 4 at World qualifying tournaments. I went through that data. They had double the top 4 representation of any other faction. And so he was so prevalent and so strong and so efficient. And now I think he's just like a good squad, which is awesome. I don't agree with everything that AMG has changed in this update, but this might be their best change in my opinion, purely because they have taken something that was way too efficient and broken and way too meta-defining and have now turned it into just a good option, which I think is awesome. Getting relay for 3 bombers is great. I'm thinking of like Yularen. I'm thinking of Plo. You know, he's not going to be the total game changer that he was before, but now he just slots in as like, yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about Matchstick as one of my 4 aces in a bomber ball. You think about something like Anakin, either the Delta 7 or the bomber, if you want to go heavy into bombing. One or both of the V19 aces and then Matchstick. That's a great 4 ace combo, and then you run a bunch of Y-Wings, or you run some V19s and some Y-Wings, or maybe even some arcs with hyperspace rings, because now you don't really need boosted comms quite as much. So I think he's going to still see quite a bit of play. I think he's still valuable to the Republic, but he's no longer broken. And I give props to AMG for that. I think that this was a great change for him. So that wraps up everything. That wraps up all the changes. Overall, I'm very pleased with these. I'm excited to get back to list building. It's been so refreshing, you know, list building now and not having to worry about old Anakin. That's just totally, don't have to worry about it at all. And being able to have a little bit more flexibility of Onagers are still going to be there, but I don't have to be quite as concerned because my opponent's going to be giving up some stuff if they're going to be running Onagers. So that's a nice consideration. Also don't have to worry about stupid old Matchstick. So I'm very excited to continue list building. I think that this is a great step for Armada. Most of the community seems to agree that these are fantastic changes on the whole. You know, people can argue about little bits and pieces, but I think the health of the game has definitely gone up. I think that the game is in a much healthier state now than it was before October 11th. And so I am very excited to see what this does for the rest of the qualifying events and the kinds of lists we'll see. And I'm especially excited to see what Worlds looks like in light of this. I think you're still going to have some things that were strong that are not getting touched as much. I think some stuff is going to go up in power, of course. Some lists that were previously not super viable are going to be viable again. I think on the whole, these changes are great for CIS because Matchstick, Anakin, and Onagers were some of their least favorite things to run up against, and we're kind of gatekeeping them out of the meta, and now those things have been neutered or are straight up gone. And so I think this is great for CIS players. But I don't want to go too much longer. That is going to wrap it up today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you agree, disagree, etc. in the comments, of course, feel free to post those. I'll try to respond to as many as I can. I know, once again, this is not the Imperial Squadron tier list video that I've been promising for forever. I will still get to that. It's just that this is big news in the Armada community that I wanted to touch on. Also, thank you for those of you who watched the Anakin video. I know that is no longer relevant because he's been changed. I like to think that AMG watched that video and listened to the podcast and was like, okay, yeah, we'll do something about it finally. But I know that's not true. But that was my most, my fastest viewed video and one of my most liked videos I've ever put out. So I appreciate those of you who watched it and left comments on it. Without any further ado, though, I'll let you guys get on with your day. Have a great rest of your days. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.